In this lesson, I'm going to show you how to integrate rspec and autotest into a new Sinatra application. So let's get started. The first step is to fire up the terminal and download the necessary gems that we require. First, as we're going to be using rspec, we need to install that. So I'm going to do sudo gem install rspec. Give that a few seconds and that'll be finished. So with that installed alone, let's build our first test and then we'll slowly expand upon this. I'm going to open up my editor and you can see it's blank. So what we want to do here is, for the example, maybe create a stringify service where all you're going to do is provide a string and it's going to reverse it. Just something to ensure that our tests are working correctly. So I'm going to create a new file here and we're going to make this as simple as possible. I see a lot of tutorials where they tell you to add 6 files and that's a lot to take in, especially when you don't know what each file does. So we're going to start as basic as we possibly can and we'll call it reverse.rb. Next, we need to create our test. So I'm going to create another file and call it reverse spec. Now I want you to note that our test has the same name as our controller. We simply append _spec. So first, we need to get started here. We need to note what we're working with. So I'm going to require that right now. And we want to include reverse.rb. So one way to do this is, because this is going to be relative to the Ruby execution, we'll say file.dirname and then reverse.rb. So what this is doing here is it's getting a path to this file, an absolute path. And then we're going to get the directory name of it. So that's going to slice off the file name itself. And then it's just going to say project. And then we're going to append the name of this file. Now that we've included this file, we can begin our test. So because we've installed rspec, we can say describe, and we'll call this reverse service. Now within this block, we can create our first test. And what should it do? It should reverse the string that you provided. So we will reference a reverse function that we haven't created yet. We'll do that right now. Def reverse. And now we want to call this function provided a string. I'll do my name. And we'll say that should equal my name reversed, Y-E-R-F-F-E-J. So now we have our test created. Why don't we go ahead and run it? As you can see, I am within my project folder. So now I will type rspec reverse spec.rb and let's see what we get. Now, sure enough, it's run. It's a little difficult to see, but don't worry, we're going to fix that shortly. But we can see there was an error. So one failure, and this is standard. We want to make sure we fail first. And we can see wrong number of arguments was provided. What's going on here is we're passing an argument here, but this function does not accept any argument. So why don't we say that? Let's try it one more time. And now we have a different error. And we can see it expected my name in reverse, but instead nil was returned because, of course, we haven't done anything in our function. So let's figure out how we can reverse this string. Within this function, I will say take that string, and we're going to go to each character. And so that's going to split it into each individual letter. And then we are going to convert those to an array. Then we're going to call the reverse method on it, which will reverse the items within that array. And then we're going to join them back together. So let's see if we did that correctly. I'm going to come back, clear this, and run our spec again. And sure enough, our test worked and we had 0 failures. If we want to do one more test, we could say hello, and we know that reverse should equal OLLEH. Let's run this again. Good, so now we know our spec is working correctly. The next step is we want to integrate Sinatra. So if you've never used Sinatra before, you want to make sure you install it by doing sudo gem install Sinatra. And next, we're going to come back to our reverse.rb file, and it's very simple to integrate Sinatra. We'll begin by requiring Sinatra. And next, we do want to test to make sure it works. So I'm going to go get the root of our site, and we'll just return hello world. And now, with that set up, let's try it out. So to run this, I'm going to say ruby reverse.rb. And now we can see Sinatra has taken the stage at 4, 5, 6, 7. And if I load that up, you can see, sure enough, Sinatra is working. We do have hello world being returned. Now, this isn't specifically a Sinatra tutorial, so we're not going to go any further than that. But now we want to run some tests to make sure that hello world is returned. So we're going to return to reverse spec. And in order to test with Sinatra, we want to make sure that we require rack/test. So if you need to install that gem, sudo gem install rack, make sure you do so. Next, I'm going to make sure that I set the environment, and that's going to be equal to a test environment. Next, we want to make sure that we can run things like it should load the home page. And what I ideally want to do is say something like get this. and I want to make sure that the result is going to be equal to a status of 200. And we could do that with Sinatra testing by doing something like last response dot should be okay. So we could either do should be okay, and that's going to check to see if the status was 200, or we could say last response dot status dot should equal 200. Either one will be okay, but I'll stick with this one for the time being. Now let's see what happens though if we run this. I'm going to create a new tab so that I can keep Sinatra running. And once again, I'm going to run rspec.rb. So we can see there is a failure. And what's going on is we're trying to run this function, but it doesn't know what it is. So that's why we're getting an error. We want to make sure we include the necessary functions and methods. So here, I'm going to make sure that I include rack test methods so that I can use things like get /. So now let's try it again. The next problem is you can see right here, undefined local variable or method app for rspec. So we need to specify that the app is a Sinatra app. And we can do that. And we'll say def app is going to be a Sinatra application. One more time and let's run it. And now we have 0 failures. So let's make sure that it does fail to make sure it's working. So we know the page will load. Why don't we just do a test and say it should not be okay? Because we know that's not true. I'm going to run that. And we do get a failure. The last response should not be okay. So it expected false, but instead we got true. So we can also change this to a route that we don't know, non-real, and run it one more time. And now we expected it to be true, but we got false because that route does not exist. So if we wanted to fix this, we could come back, create a new route, and now we will run it again. And good, one example, 0 failures. So next we want to auto test. That way we don't have to manually run that rspec command. So we need to install a utility called autotest, and we can do that by doing sudo gem install zen test. With this installed, we next need to let autotest know that we are working with rspec. And the way we can do that is by creating a new file, and we're going to give this a name of .rspec. And once Autotest scans the files and comes across this, it's going to trigger rspec functionality. And while we're here, why don't we make the coloring a bit more pretty so that we see green for success and red for denied. So I'm going to run format nested, and we're also going to include color. So let's save that, and I will close that out. And now let's see if things are working as we would hope. So I will clear this, and now I'm going to type autotest. And what's going to happen when I click enter is, as you can see, it seems to be hanging. So if you need to figure out what the problem is, I'm going to press Control-C a few times to exit out. And now I'm going to type it again, autotest verbose mode. And what's happening here is no tests are matching, and that's because we need to follow a specific convention when using rspec with autotest. And that means we need to store our tests within a folder called spec. So I'm going to reveal this in the Finder and create a new folder called spec, and now I'm going to drag all of my tests into this folder like so. So now if I come back and we open this up, the only thing we've changed is we've moved to the folder. Let's see if that fixes it. I'm going to exit out one more time, and I will run it again. And now we can see, okay, good, this seems to be working. It's now monitoring our spec files to see if there's anything changed. So let's change something. I'm going to come back in, and now let's look for something different that's not a real URL so that we can make this fail. Save it. And now if I come back, can you see it automatically runs? Last response should have been okay, but false. There was no response. So we know to fix that. Now the next thing I'm noting is it doesn't seem as if our color is taking form. So let me come back and make sure I have that correct. I will go to .rspec. Looks like I have an extra space there. I'm going to fix that, save it, and now there's our color. So let's try it one more time. Auto test. We can see there's a failure in red, so let's try to get it to green. Change this back to a real URL so that it passes. And now we have one example, 0 failures. Good. Next, I would like to set up growl notifications, and we're also going to install an additional gem that will improve performance a great deal. So I will return to terminal and do gem install autotest-growl. This way we can keep up to date on our tests that are running automatically without having to return to the terminal. And the next one I'm going to install is called the FS event plugin. And this will keep Autotest from having to constantly pull our file system. So we'll do gem install autotest-fs event. Now what you'll see here is, in order to use it, we need to make sure we require it within our project. So I'm going to return to my project, create a new file, and save it as .autotest. And within here, we can require any assets that we need. I'm going to add both of the ones that we just installed. And next, I'm going to restart terminal to make sure everything is up to date. So once again, I will type autotest. And if we did everything correctly, ta-da, we have Growl notifications. So let's try a new test. Let's say we have post to the home page, and all we want to do here is reverse whatever string is passed. And we'll say that string has the name of str. So we will call reverse, and we're going to pass in params str. So if we did everything correctly, it's going to take, let's say we pass my name, Jeff. It's going to send that to the reverse and turn it into ffej. Let's make sure it works, and we're going to test it. Come back to reverse spec, and we'll say it reverse posted values as well. So now we're going to send a post request to this URL, and we can pass some params by doing params equal, and now we just need to pass what this value is, like so. And now we'll test the results. So we'll say last response.body.should equal ffej if we did everything correct. So I will save it. Auto test will automatically run, and we'll see. Good job. That ran successfully. Let's make it fail. And now we can see it expected FFE, but instead we got FFEJ because that's what we passed through. Fix it, and there we are. So now we are using rspec inside of a Sinatra application. We're using autotest to automatically run each test. And then we're using growl notification and just a bit of coloring to make things a bit more attractive. So that's the extent of this tutorial. If you have any questions, let me know, and we'll definitely help you within the comments. For more tips and tutorials, always visit net.touchplus.com, the best tutorials and screencasts in the world.